increasingly important word in the atomic and hydrogen age.
The Fallout franchise is almost 30 years old, and it's been through a lot over those years. First owned by Interplay Entertainment, and now Bethesda Studios, it's gone from a series that looks like this, to looking like this. As a result, the games almost feel like they represent two different eras. Old and new. Modern and classic. So you can bet we're getting the Classic Fallout Iceberg. I'll be using this design by Educational Wave 786, who has posted it on the Classic Fallout subreddit. Just like that forum, this video will be for everyone who either loves the older games from Interplay or wants to try getting into them. I hope you guys enjoy. Without further ado, let's get right into it. In Fallout 1, it's actually possible to fail the main quest line in two different ways, getting a bad ending cutscene as a result. During the first stage of the main quest, the player, also known in the first game as the Vault Dweller, is tasked with finding a water chip for their home, Vault 13. The Vault's water purification system relies on a control chip to make drinking water, and the only one they had is now broken. So, the Vault Dweller gets sent on a mission to find a replacement chip out in the wasteland. Except, there's a catch. Unlike other RPGs, where you kinda have time to dilly-dally in the face of an apocalyptic crisis, Vault 13's crisis is the real deal. You only have 150 days to find a new water chip. If you take too long, you'll get 2 warnings that your people's water reserves are running low. Hit 150 days, and... Everyone the Vault Dweller knows and loves dying of dehydration is a bad enough ending, but it's not the only way to fail the game. During the second half of the main quest, it becomes your goal to wipe out the Master and his army of super mutants. They serve as a major threat against mankind and your Vault, looking to convert humanity into mutants and bring about an enforced unity. And while there is a good ending where the Vault Dweller defeats the Master, there exists an ending where they don't. By talking to either the Lieutenant or the Master, one can choose to betray their Vault, reveal its location, and join the mutant cause. This results in a cutscene considered one of the darkest bad endings in gaming history. I'll let you judge for yourself. Special encounters are a unique type of random encounter that occur while traveling across the world map. Rather than exploring one big open world, the original Fallout games abstracted world travel and made it a matter of moving across a map between different destinations. But even this was still interesting, owing to the chance of random encounters and the memorable special encounters. They could involve anything, from finding a unique NPC to talk with, to stumbling upon the TARDIS from Doctor Who, a UFO with a working alien blaster, and a picture of Elvis, and much more. They were fun Easter eggs to find, and ironically enough, given their name, something that made the first games feel special. Special weapons are a small number of unique weapons that can be found in either special encounters or by doing quests. These include the likes of the 9mm Mauser you can loot off Gizmo, and the Alien Blaster. In the original Fallout games, you could, let's say, prevent a teenage wasteland. Yeah, there's no dressing this up. You could kill kids. It definitely wasn't encouraged, as there was a reputation you could get for it in which NPCs suddenly hate the player. And it is worth mentioning that digital releases of Fallout 1 sold today don't have children in them. They're completely removed from the game, just like what happened with the UK release. Fun fact about that, Europe wouldn't even sell Fallout if there were kids in it.
They wouldn't even sell the game if there were children in the game. We didn't have time to read all the quests. What we just did is we just deleted kids off the disc.
While the UK version was censored, the original US version wasn't. However, now all the digital versions sold today are censored. So basically, I think in order to play it safe with international audiences, Bethesda went with something like that UK cut of the game with the Steam and GOG versions. Except it's kinda weird, because Fallout 2 has children who die in story moments and that you can kill yourself, so why is only the first game censored? I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, you could just install a patch or mod to add all the censored stuff back in if you want. Including... Chris Avellone is a game designer and writer who has worked on the likes of Fallout 2, Interplay's Fallout 3, and New Vegas. His name makes some appearances in the games themselves, as a mercenary in Fallout 1 and a mayor in Fallout Tactics. He was also responsible for compiling the Fallout Bible, which contains tons of info and lore surrounding classic Fallout. Avellone has one hell of a resume under his belt, and is considered one of the greatest writers in gaming history. I'd recommend watching his game conference talks, as well as checking out his blog, Fallout...
Apocrypha.
It gives some interesting insights, including why horses might be extinct in the Fallout universe, and how Dogmeat is the continually reincarnating eternal champion of dog kind. Check it out. The classic Fallouts had an isometric perspective, and even when talking to NPCs in dialogue mode, that doesn't change. Unless you talk to one of the game's special NPCs, where rather than talking to a sprite, you would get...
Greetings. Your business in Shady Sands might be...
This is what the Interplay devs called talking heads, clay models that were sculpted, then digitized and animated. The process to make only one head was about 8 weeks, so plans to make 50 of them were understandably scrapped. The heads we do get have been called poorly aged or uncanny, but for me, there is a charm to them, the same way retro graphics can have a charm to many. The imperfection of the heads makes them memorable. And in Fallout's case, I'd argue that imperfection actually makes more sense here than in other older games. Here, we're not supposed to be looking at perfect, clean humans. We're looking at the rugged survivors of a wasteland. So the abstraction definitely helps remind us of this dark reality. Combined with their A-list voice talents, as well as how expressive they can be, the talking heads just work. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel killed Interplay Entertainment? So, the answer for this one is ultimately no. Interplay was never killed. It still exists, only as a shell of its former self, capitalizing on its remaining IPs. Rather than a tragic death, think a tragic fall from grace. As for Fallout Brotherhood of Steel causing it, Brotherhood of Steel, or BOS, or POS as some call it, was definitely the last game Interplay released before the company was brought into bankruptcy court and forced to sell the Fallout IP in 2007. And with how the game was designed, it was clearly made hoping to appeal to a wider market, with the likes of Slipknot music, more sexualized characters, and a focus around action. Ultimately though, BOS failed to sell well enough to rescue Interplay, but it's not solely to blame. Interplay was already suffering lower sales, poor team morale, and apparently making bad financial decisions, so its fall was basically guaranteed, no matter how good any Hail Mary game could have been. I will say though, it is funny to picture BOS being the killing blow, especially considering how universally hated it is amongst Fallout fans. The game is just not respected at all, and rather deservedly, it's seen as a final nail in the coffin than a true Fallout title. Reused assets are prevalent in Fallout 2 and New Vegas. In Fallout 2's case, there's a lot of textures and character models from the first game that appear again in the sequel. Even the player character gets the same exact Vault 13 jumpsuit model from Fallout 1, with no wear or tear to speak of. There is a narrative reason for getting the suit, but one could argue it's just a creative way of reusing old assets instead of making new ones. It's also a sign of Fallout 2's insanely short development time of basically 9 months. The devs just didn't have time to make a game completely filled with new assets, so asset reuse was basically a necessity. Then there was Fallout New Vegas, whose development studio Obsidian Entertainment only had 18 months of dev time to finish it, on a 3D engine the company hadn't used before. It's not really shocking that, to ease development, New Vegas ended up using assets from Fallout 3. So at the end of the day, while it won't win the games any points for originality, it does make sense why the asset reuse is there. Floaters are one of the hideous creations of FEV, and served in the Master's army as a sort of war animal. They have an inflation sac under their mouths that allows them to float, hence the name floater. And they're a decent threat against the player. But there is a lot more to them beyond being a late game enemy. For starters, the actual origin of the floaters remains a mystery. While the super mutants derive from FEV experimentation on humans, and the centaurs are a weird combo between a human, a dog, and a cat, the floaters are a bit harder to pinpoint. There's a theory that the floaters are the result of mutated flatworms, due to the worms being mentioned in records pertaining to FEV research, but there's no definitive connection between the two outside of appearances, and it's never been confirmed. Another fun fact around floaters is how they were made. Their creator is Jason D. Anderson, a former Interplay designer and artist who says he used a pornographic image to design their mouths. He called them sphincter monsters, and suddenly things check out. The floaters recently made an appearance in Fallout 76 as a variant species in Appalachia, West Virginia. However, they do look a lot different than their California counterparts. Maybe one day, we'll get a new Fallout game where we get to see the original porn-inspired design in full 3D glory. The Chosen One is the name of the player character in Fallout 2, and them being the strongest in the game, never mind the series, is a solid claim. Keep in mind that Frank Horrigan, who is the strongest, deadliest enemy in the classic games, serves as Fallout 2's final encounter, and the Chosen One destroys him. Frank Horrigan, who punches a Deathclaw's head off, is reduced to this. No matter your personal ranking of the Fallout protagonists, needless to say, you don't want to mess with the Chosen One. TKS Mantis is a Fallout YouTuber known for his useless fact series and coverage of the original games, including the one that kickstarted his love for the franchise, Fallout 2. I'd recommend giving his content a watch, as he has some good videos on the classic games and gives advice to newcomers looking to get into them. So check him out. The idea of the classic Fallout games being remastered comes up time and time again, but nothing official has been confirmed, and Bethesda as a studio is on record as prioritizing original releases compared to endless remasters. Unless the game's Skyrim. And unless your owner is now Microsoft. So, I don't know, maybe a remaster might be on the table sometime in the future for another anniversary. I would say it's very unlikely, just sales and audience-wise. Also, while Bethesda does have the source code of the original games, it would take work to update code made for this. All that effort and resources spent for a non-mainstream game. I just don't see it happening. But say if the stars ever aligned and they got the right consultants to help with the project, I think it could be awesome. I would really like to see a remake or remaster that fixes remaining bugs and spelling issues. Plus, Tim has this fantastic video on his channel detailing what he'd want to do with a remake if given the opportunity. Things like adding more reactivity, upping the quality of the assets which was sacrificed by early 3D technology. Just taking the game up to 11. That's the remake I'd want to play. And even if it doesn't happen, one can dream.
Spare change, old friend, old pal? Can you help a poor mutant down on his luck?
Harold is a fan-favorite character in the series, known for his good nature and storytelling. He's also interesting in that while he's similar to ghouls in the franchise, being practically immortal, he isn't quite one of them. See, Harold was mutated because of exposure to the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV, not radiation exposure like how the other ghouls were mutated. He does have a ghoul-like appearance, but unique to him, an unusual growth is forming on his head. It's a tree. Harold calls it Bob. Then Bob makes Harold become a tree. It's actually a pretty sad fate, and it oddly mirrors one of Harold's former companions, Richard Gray, who was mutated right alongside Harold. Only Gray became the Master, a horrific hive mind of amalgamated flesh that used his newfound mutation to forcibly mutate Wastelanders. He became worshipped by the children of the Cathedral, and used them as spies and healers to subvert mankind until his death. Meanwhile, centuries after the Master's passing, Harold becomes fully transformed because of Bob, and just really hates it. In fact, when a group of people start worshipping him, calling themselves the Tree Minders, he doesn't like that much either. All this guy wants to do is die, and yet there's this faction feuding over him, deciding whether they should accelerate his growth to plant trees throughout the wasteland, or whether it's safer to only have him serve as a small oasis. This is a development that occurs during Fallout 3, so it's not classic Fallout. However, it is a classic feeling quest with a lot of choices of a morally ambiguous nature. The same stuff the original game shot for according to its vision document. And no matter what choice is made, it caps off a story 3 games in the making. All around a fan favorite character from the originals. The New California Republic, or NCR, was founded at the end of Fallout 1. In that game, there's a small village called Shady Sands, which is struggling to really defend itself from mutant and raider attacks. Aradesh is the leader, and his daughter Tandy gets kidnapped by the Khan's group of raiders halfway through the game. Assuming you save Tandy and that both of these characters are alive by the end of the playthrough, it's revealed that big things are in store for Shady Sands.
In Shady Sands, Tandy helps her father Aradesh bring a new community and new life out of the broken remains of the world. They are responsible for the new California Republic, whose ideals spread across the land.
Out of Shady Sands came the NCR, a post-war government emulating old world values of democracy and freedom. It's appeared multiple times throughout the series as a major faction in the Wasteland, and it's also become increasingly corrupted with each installment. In Fallout 2, conspiring against a nearby settlement called Vault City so that they assimilate with the NCR, and then turning into an expansionistic empire by New Vegas, dressing up conquest as democratization. The NCR's current status is unknown after Season 1 of the Fallout show, with its first capital, Shady Sands, now being a crater after a nuclear attack. But while we might not know what the NCR will become, we'll always know how it started. Bethesda saved Fallout. Yeah, this one's gonna tick people off. The fact is, Bethesda did acquire the Fallout IP from a failing Interplay, and turned what was once a well-received computer RPG series into a household name. The Fallout franchise isn't at any risk of dying, and that is because of Bethesda. Their games are heavily marketed and know how to reel in large audiences by simplifying systems and catering to the masses. Fallout isn't a niche turn-based RPG anymore. It's a mainstream success. It'll live on forever now, but it will live at a cost. There's always a price with the kind of mass appeal you see in big franchises like this. For example, a lot of the darkness inherent to Fallout's post-apocalyptic hellscape got toned down in favor of pulpy, wacky wasteland fun. Even the original intent of the series, to explore the ethics of a post-nuclear wasteland, isn't nearly as solidly delivered now as it should be. It's the game that sold the world, quite literally. Now, to play devil's advocate, it's better to have something to complain about than nothing at all. The franchise is alive, and we did get Fallout New Vegas out of the deal, which is often considered to be the best in the whole franchise. Imagine if Bethesda didn't acquire the series. Would we have gotten another Fallout game at all, let alone New Vegas? So many modders and artists have been drawn in because of that game alone. Not to mention, a lot of gamers now know the older games and show their respect to them because of the new ones, because of Bethesda. So perhaps some sympathy for the devil is in order here. Okay, actually, scratch that, never mind. Fallout Sonora and Nevada are total conversion mods for Fallout 2. They were created by a small team of modders called Nevada Band Studio, led by a Siberian designer named Alexander, aka Black Designer. I won't get too into these mods because they're gonna get their own video one day, but to keep it short, these aren't just mods. These are entire new Fallout games, and just about the closest attempts at capturing the spirit of the originals there's been besides Fallout 1.5. They were made by fans for fans, designed around the original principles of the classic Fallouts, from multiple choices and quests to moral dilemmas in a dark wasteland setting. While I haven't finished these games yet, I am impressed by what I've played so far, and I'd recommend them to anyone looking for more old school Fallout or solid RPGs. I also wanted to give a shout out to one of the designers on Fallout Sonora, Alexander Berzin, or Red 888 Guns, an artist who's been making I'm not even lying here, some of the best fan art for the classic games. It's been featured already in this video, and it's awesome. In fact, Alexander is working right now with New Blood Interactive on a Fallout-inspired project of theirs, set in a retro-futuristic pre-war setting. Really looking forward to that, along with Black Designer's future RPG project now that he's done with Sonora's development. This guy's going commercial, and I'd love to support him with my money. So keep an eye out for sure, because this guy delivers the goods. Gore is practically a trademark of the Fallout franchise. It's featured in the marketing, and no surprise, it wound up in the Fallout TV show. Even the vision document, detailing the pillars of the first game's design, made its first point specifically about Fallout's mega-violence. When people die, they don't just die. They get cut in half, they melt into a pile of goo, explode like a blood sausage, or several different ways, depending on the weapon you use. When I use my rocket launcher on some poor, defenseless townsperson, he'll know, and his neighbors will be cleaning up the blood for weeks. This is the wasteland. Life is cheap, and violence is all that there is. Again, gore is a staple of the series at this point, but there is reason to place it in the classic Fallout list. That's because the new gore is a whole different beast compared to the old stuff. And I know how that sounds, so hear me out. The new games are 3D and have a lot more glorious, gory detail. Eyes and limbs go flying. Heck, you can even carry them around like the inhumane savage you are. But at the end of the day, it's kinda just cool. There's no weight to exploding people or blasting bodies apart. At most, it's like your bullets are making surgical slices or popping a balloon. Meanwhile, gore in the original games, despite the limited death animations, is memorable in a twisted way. You're not just exploding people, you're splintering them. You rend them apart. It's crunchy and horrific, and a hell of a reason why the older Fallout games are considered dark games. Cut from Fallout 1, the Vipers were planned to be a joinable raider group, much like the Khans. They even share a similar origin, also being inhabitants of Vault 15 who fled into the wasteland and were changed by it for the worst. Except, whereas the Khans are your typical thieving, killing raiders, the Vipers were a zealous cult of snake worshippers. Driven mad by the venom of mutant vipers, this crazy faction lived next to a pit of the creatures, worshipping them as gods and sacrificing travelers to them. This would have also included the player. If they managed to somehow survive the pit, they would be offered the chance of becoming an honorary member of the Vipers by performing one more task for them. You'd think slaying their gods would be enough, but I guess they have high standards. There's a ton of lore that was written for these guys, including monthly coma rituals and how they were founded, but none of it is in Fallout 1. Then the Vipers got to appear in New Vegas, but as this shell of their former self. They're just generic raider bad guys who use guns. Nothing about them wearing bone armor or being proficient in stealth, using paralytics to stun their enemies and gather them as sacrifices. I guess there is a lore reason for their current state, but it's still sad we never got a taste of the classic Vipers. The games is too difficult. This is a reference to criticism often leveled towards the older games that they're way too hard. Attacks miss too much. Rats can kill you in the first 5 minutes. Ants can kill you in the first 5 minutes. The game is hard and therefore bad, hence negative Steam review. In all seriousness though, the games do have a bit of a learning curve, especially for audiences used to the newer titles. I was even surprised that I got into the older games like I did, but it probably comes down to the fact that growing up, I played a bunch of puzzle games like I Spy. I was used to randomly clicking around a screen to progress. I lucked out. Plenty of people haven't, and it's gonna be harder going from an action-based FPS to a slower, zoomed-out RPG. Make no mistake, the original games are not Bethesda Fallout. The original games are classic Fallout, and it will beat you to your knees if you let it. There are good resources for playing these games, and probably many more that I'm not listing right now. But I wanted to throw my own hat in the ring to help people out. The games are a bit difficult, so here's what you can do. Number 1, understand that you can make a bad build. Some skills are much better than others, to the point of absurdity, and there's no respec options. So, fear your creation. Make it something you know you can rely on. Number 2. Speed things up. You don't have to walk everywhere you go. You can double click to run. Heck, you can actually go to the settings and turn on always run if you want. But just keep in mind, you can't sneak and move with this setting on. Also, make sure you crank the combat speed up so animations are faster. Trust me on this, you're not missing much. You don't want to play Classic Fallout like... Number 3. You're an underdog. Once you leave the vault, you see Ed. Ed is dead. Why is this? Because Ed's like you. He wasn't the chosen one, and neither are you. You may think you were chosen to save the vault just because you're special. You're not. You just picked the short straw. Also, the wasteland's a dangerous place, and Ed was probably killed by rats. Don't think you're lesser for running around rats. Pride cometh before the fall. You are an underdog, and you're gonna be fighting for your survival. Save your ammo and pick your battles wisely. Then comes Fallout 2, which actually does make you the chosen one, but not in the divine sense, more like the Nepo baby sense. And this game's even harder than the first one. They were not joking around here, especially with the random encounters. They can mess a whole party of companions up. So my suggestion is, don't rush. Do the quests in town, level yourself up, get yourself and your companions good gear, and don't forget to raise the outdoorsman skill. It's useless in Fallout 1, but useful in Fallout 2 for skipping encounters. Save sometimes during your travels, just to avoid getting randomly screwed. Basically, even though you are the hero, you're an underdog, and you ought to make survival a pretty big priority. Number 4. Use your head. It's best to almost picture the original games like a hybrid between an RPG and an adventure game. You're solving a mystery in the main quest. You're exploring settlements and gathering clues to complete objectives. You're navigating a UI from the 1990s. Slow down. This isn't an action FPS. Use your head. And that's all I'm gonna offer. But it should be enough to know that while the games are hard, they're not impossible. If 90s kids could play them, so can you. Vault Boy and Pip Boy are different characters, or at least they originally were. Vault Boy is the mascot of Vault-Tec, and also appears in the wearable computer called Pip Boy, as seen in various perks and UI elements. Pip Boys were standard equipment in vaults, and this connection has led Vault Boy to be called Pip Boy sometimes. However, this isn't supposed to be correct. See, Robco were the creators of Pip Boy, and gave it an original mascot that isn't Vault Boy and wasn't designed by Vault-Tec. It's lesser known about because it only appeared briefly in the classic games on the Pip Boy 2000 series, until much recently with Fallout 76 in the Fallout show. It also probably didn't help that the poor dude was blocked by the countdown timer in Fallout 1 for half the game. See, right there. That is Pip Boy. And yet, a lot of people don't know about him. They just use Vault Boy and Pip Boy interchangeably. Even when you specifically look up Pip Boy mascot, you'll get Vault Boy pop up as your first result, because they're just so well associated now. And to make matters worse, Bethesda put the final nail in the coffin by renaming Pip Boy into Vault Boy 2000 in Fallout 76. So, while I really wish I could say this entry helps clear the confusion surrounding a tiny piece of classic Fallout lore, Bethesda retconned that chance away. Vault Boy and Pip Boy were once meant to be two different characters, but now they're officially merged as one. Fallout Tactics launched with multiplayer and a number of game modes, including Capture the Flag, Skirmish Mode, a scavenger hunt mode where players had to collect more items than the rival team to win, and a mode called Assault where teams try to destroy each other's bases. You won't be able to play Tactics multiplayer through normal means, since the servers have been shut down, but YouTuber Triangle City does have a video on how to set it up, which is playing in the background right now. Give it a watch if you've ever thought what Classic Fallout needed was a deathmatch mode. Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game, is the full title for the first Fallout game, but that almost wasn't the case. Fallout did go through a lot of name ideas, including After the Bomb and Hiroshima Revisited. However, the name that seems to have gotten the most traction before Fallout, the one we see the most early artwork for, is Vault 13. I think the implication of this entry is that, in another timeline, the first game in the series would have been called Vault 13, a post-nuclear role-playing game. That still works, honestly, but as Tim Kaines pointed out, it had been hard to make sequels for, and Fallout just hits a lot harder. Gecko in a Can was promotional merchandise made for Fallout 2, and according to what I found off the No Mutants Allowed forum, was handed out at the Fallout 2 release party as part of the gift bags people got. It's a can with a plush gecko inside. Pretty cute, and a lot nicer than the geckos we do get throughout the series. The Cut Submarine is a cut location from Fallout 2, also known as the Shi. It belonged to the Shi, the descendants of a pre-war Chinese submarine crew who made a home for themselves in the post-war ruins of San Francisco. Originally, the player would need to deactivate its automated defense system in order to drive a tanker past it and reach the Enclave's oil rig. It was meant to be yet another step in the main quest, and would have just padded the game's runtime. So it does make sense why it got cut. Death messages were featured in the original Fallouts, where upon dying, you'd get to hear Ron Perlman tell you about it.
The darkness of the afterlife is all that awaits you now. May you find more peace in that world than you found in this one.
Each message had a percentage chance of happening, and this was taken further into Fallout 2. Whereas most of the messages are really grim, Fallout 2 includes a number of messages that are basically just silly jokes, having a 1% chance of happening. Take a listen.
You're dead. Again. Boy, are you stupid. And dead. Time to reload. Hope you saved your game. 'Cause you're dead. Here's a picture of your corpse. Not pretty.
Valerie, also known as Vic's daughter, is a character who appears in Fallout 2, and is part of a unique encounter that can occur if you have Vic in your party. Take him to Vault City, enter the maintenance center, and suddenly, there's this kind of cutscene that happens where the two characters are talking to each other, and so is the player character. I'm not the biggest fan of this, even though I really like the idea of the encounter. More stuff like this could be really cool, bringing a companion along and running into a character that they happen to know, triggering dialogue or combat, and we kind of get a prototype for that here. It's just the execution is really weird. The game suddenly pauses for this moment where you have no input over what you say. In an RPG where that's kind of the point. It could have been something that happens in the dialogue window, where maybe we get to interject and roleplay, but instead, the roleplaying is done for us. It's unusual, and Vic's daughter causes it. An intelligent spore plant named Seymour lives in Broken Hills, the result of the local professor's science experiments. As a young sapling, it learned early on to play dumb so that it didn't fall victim to scientific examination. Seymour asks the player to scoop him up with a shovel and move him closer to the local ghouls, so he has someone to talk to, in exchange for chess lessons for you to beat the professor's intelligent rad scorpion. Yeah, Fallout 2 was an interesting game. The whole encounter is a reference to Little Shop of Horrors, which also had a talking plant named Seymour, although it eventually became a threat against mankind. So who knows? Maybe helping shovel up Seymour was actually a big mistake. Cassidy's cut talking head is a reference to a mistake made by the Fallout fandom. Namely, the belief that Fallout 2's John Cassidy had a talking head cut out of the original game, when he never did. This talking head you see right here is actually part of a mod called Mutant Rising that's been in development since 2003. The head was reused in the Fallout 2 Restoration Project mod, which was designed to bring back content that was cut out of Fallout 2. This led Nukipedia, a Fallout fan wiki website, to mistakenly believe that Cassidy's head was actual cut content made by Interplay that was now being restored. It wouldn't be such a big deal, except the official Fallout board game ended up releasing their design of John Cassidy, which looks a lot like the modded talking head. The board game expansion with Cassidy came out in 2018. And according to the Wayback Machine, we can see that the Nukipedia mistake still hadn't been fixed by the end of 2019. This mistake in confusing what's official and what's fan-made content may have well caused a mod to become official lore. The classic Fallout games had a ton of quests that got cut out or never worked on due to time constraints. And we're gonna go over them. All of them. All the ones I could find. Let's do this. Starting with Fallout 1. Originally, you'd been able to become a member of the Blades Gang, following an order from their leader Razor to kill someone. Assumedly, this either would have been one of the regulators who killed her boyfriend, or a gang member from the Rippers, their rival. Completing this quest would have unlocked another, where you could help Blades member Romero deliver a locket and message to his love Juliana, who lived in Aditum. You could have helped the star-crossed lovers out, or make their love story a tragedy. Speaking of tragic love stories, Razor lost her love Jason Zimmerman, the son of Aditum's mayor, to the regulators, who control the town and pinned his murder on the Blades Gang. But originally, Jason would have been alive, captured by the Rippers and in need of rescue. You could deliver a mysterious package from the Gunrunners to the followers of the Apocalypse, which turned out to be a bomb. You could report Iguana Bob to Hub Police instead of just blackmailing him about the true source of iguana bits. You could save a Junktown waitress named Trish who got attacked by the Skulls Gang, save Aditum's residents from being attacked by gangs, and... these things are getting their own entry, quests included. I've been saving the best for last though. Of all Fallout 1's cut quests, the next ones did stand out the most to me, but also sting the most. For Fallout 1, there was the cut Viper's Initiation questline, which I mentioned earlier in the video but didn't really get into. There'd have been multiple ways of getting initiated. If you want to roleplay a devious raider, loot a caravan or a settlement for supplies. Or, for a less evil choice, you can help the Vipers reclaim territory from other raiders. It's a lot more nuanced than the Khan's initiation of, just shoot these girls, prove you're bad to the bone, and I really would have liked to have seen it. I also would have wanted the Children of the Cathedral spy quests. The followers of the Apocalypse are a benevolent faction that preserve old world information and serve to educate the wasteland. They're humanitarians, and the Master's Children of the Cathedral want them eliminated, so they put a spy in their base. This would have led to a mystery-styled quest of finding the spy and stopping them before it was too late. And there was going to be another one tied to the Brotherhood of Steel. Keep in mind that the followers are much more lax compared to the reclusive Brotherhood. So some harder decisions might have been on the table for the latter quest. Maybe during your investigation, you're gonna have to play it cool unless word gets around you're playing detective and they kick you out. Or worse. Maybe it's easier planting evidence on the culprit than convincing the mob they've been manipulated. Is bringing justice by the books the way to go? Or do you need a faster solution in the face of evil? In Klamath, you would have been able to expose the Duttons as cattle rustlers. Also, there would have been quests tied to the cut locations. The Abbey, a monastery of pacifist monks preserving pre-war books and manuscripts, would have allowed you to look at their library, and would have provided solutions to various quests in the game. Later, the Abbey would have been invaded by the Brotherhood of Steel, and have its books confiscated. leaving you to have to deal with the situation. It could have set up an interesting moral quandary. Do you leave all this information in the hands of a defenseless people who are probably just going to have this happen to them again? Or do you entrust it to the Brotherhood? Moreover, it could have been pretty interesting to see why exactly the Brotherhood took the manuscripts. Maybe they're just hoarding more information for themselves, or they could be fighting against the Enclave. Maybe what the Brotherhood is doing is wrong, but it's a case of the ends justifying the means. There would have been the Environmental Protection Agency and a she quest tied to it, presumably to prevent them from getting overrun by mutant plants. Or maybe that would cause it. Another she quest involved getting a body back that the Hubologist stole. You would have been able to actually rescue the sister of the tribal companion Solik from slavers, as well as helping Volt City enslave a whole village if you wanted. Sergeant Stark would have asked you to eliminate the guardian mole rats of a small nearby community, so its people would be defenseless. You could do this, or you could supply the community with guns or full power over the moles. You would have been able to bring about an orphanage for the kids of the den, which would have meant no more pickpockets. This really would have been a great inclusion. Just like the original idea to have multiple ways of reaching the oil rig in the main quest, including the use of a vertibird. It's not a full quest that got cut, but shaving this off the main quest line definitely made it feel a bit more linear. All in all, there are quests that make sense why they got cut, but I do wish we'd have gotten some of them. Speaking of cut content, we have entire cut Fallout games to talk about. With the amount of information available about them, this could be a whole video in of itself. But we're just going to be covering the basics of each game. The most infamous one being Interplay's Fallout 3, aka Van Buren. A ton of design documents surrounding this game have been released, and Fallout fans have rightfully mourned its loss. It would have been a proper continuation of the isometric games, except in 3D and with a movable camera. The player would have been an escaped prisoner, guilty or not, and would have explored the western US in the midst of a war between the NCR and Brotherhood of Steel. On top of being able to influence who wins the war, they'd have a rival party of characters to contend with who made choices in locations independently of the player if they were too late to go to them. This could have been a great RPG, with plenty of role-playing opportunities and reactivity. But the good news is, there's multiple fan projects in the works aiming to recreate the experience, so we'll probably end up seeing Van Buren in some form or another. The same can't be said about the likes of Fallout Brotherhood of Steel 2. Unlike Van Buren, I'm not quite sure people would have died to have this game. But after going through its design documents, it did sort of seem they wanted to make a better game. There would have been a reputation system which determines the quests and reactions players get, as well as a working stealth system. Maybe it would have been an improvement over BOS. Emphasis on maybe. Then there was Fallout Tactics 2, which would have focused around the threat of an irradiated Gek spreading a mutant garden throughout the wasteland. I know Tactics doesn't have the best reputation, being a combat-focused spin-off game, but hearing designer Gareth Davies talk about the sequel makes me a bit sad. Quote, "I'm also pretty disappointed that Tactics 2 never saw the light of day, since it's a title that would have benefited from the experience and criticisms of the first game. Plus, we were very conscious of heeding Fallout canon as best we could, and providing more interesting tactical missions rather than the run-and-gun focus of the first game. Alternatively, we could have gotten Fallout Extreme, a cooperative strategy game focusing on a group of rebels called the Cause. They would have first fought against the Brotherhood of Steel for killing mutants and forcing humans into military service, before facing off against China itself. Sounds goofy to me, but who knows how it would have turned out. Finally, there was Fallout Online, a planned Fallout MMO that didn't see the light of day. Chris Taylor and Marco Green, two designers on the original game, were designing this one. Even Jason Anderson was on the project for a few years, so it seems that some of the old Fallout spirit could have made its way into the MMO. Compared to the other cancelled games mentioned, this one was doomed because of the Fallout IP being bought by Bethesda. Interplay was having financial difficulties in the early 2000s, except Fallout Online was still trucking along, even after the IP buyout. There were clauses in the purchase agreement of the Fallout IP that allowed Interplay to make a Fallout-based MMO, so it shouldn't have been a problem. What happened was, Bethesda ended up attempting to rescind the license, claiming that certain funding agreements weren't upheld. This led to a bunch of legal shenanigans until a settlement agreement was met, and the game was cancelled. There was development on an original IP called Project V13 to make up for the loss, but it didn't hit its fan funding goals and nothing's come out about it recently. So sadly, it's probably just cancelled.
You're dead. Again.
The Cut Child Killer perk. So this is gonna get complicated. Child Killer isn't a perk at all. It's a reputation you get for performing juvenile population control, only found in Fallout 1 and 2. I'm not really sure if the entry is talking about the reputation or the idea of Child Killer literally being a cut perk, so I'll cover both. As a cut reputation, this could mean how Fallout 1 censors its child NPCs, making the reputation unachievable. So that is basically cutting it out of the game. However, there is something about Child Killer that was officially cut out during development on Fallout 2. That being the original piece of artwork tied to it. This is the art you get in the final release. This was the cut art. When even the artist himself says it's messed up, you know it's bad. But at the same time, I do get a kick out of it. Now, as for Child Killer being a cut perk, this is more of a spooky rumor than anything else. Keep in mind, Child Killer was cut out of the new games. It's not a thing at all in Bethesda's Fallout games. Kids are simply invulnerable to damage. This has a lot to do with different ratings boards and international releases, I'd imagine. There's also the fact that the jump from 2D to 3D is going to make things a lot more graphic, and raise a whole lot of PR hell. Fallout 1, with its pixel graphics, already had so many issues surrounding its violence. So imagine the controversy surrounding Fallout 3 if you could have been a child killer. Needless to say, it does make some sense why it's cut. Yet, I do remember there being some rumors and creepypastas about there being a cut child killer perk that would have unlocked child mortality. Most notably, there's the Lone Wolf radio creepypasta, which alleges how New Vegas had a cut quest where you could help a child killer and earn the perk for yourself. Obviously, this isn't real, but it's still a spooky idea that raises a what if. Kinda like other gaming rumors. What if you can somehow see Lara Croft naked? What if Luigi is secretly unlockable in Mario 64? What if I could get revenge on those annoying brats in Little Lamplight? Simply put, there is no child killer perk. It was just a reputation title you got in the old games for performing an evil act, and it's been understandably censored to avoid controversy. But like I said earlier, if you really want to, you can easily mod it into the new games and the classics. Fake Vault 13 is a location in Fallout 2. The real Vault 13 is a place you have to find during the main quest. An NCR citizen named Merc offers to sell you a holotape containing its exact location for 1,000 NCR dollars. Buy the holotape and you get coordinates to a fake Vault 13. The cave shape is the same, except there's no vault whatsoever, just construction signs. Definitely worth the $1,000. The protagonist of Fallout 1, the Vault Dweller, makes an appearance in Fallout Brotherhood of Steel as an NPC. He gives you a quest to find his Vault 13 flask, and he gives you multiple clues as to his background. Frankly, I don't really care for this fan service. Giving the Vault Dweller this definitive voice and badass personality was a bad call, because that character is supposed to be us. In Fallout 1, we got to roleplay as the Vault Dweller and determine who they were. That character was yours. And in BOS, they're not. For example, say you wanted to play as a woman Vault Dweller. Well, guess you were wrong. A pacifist who talks his way out of problems? Nope, the Vault Dwellers killed hundreds. To play devil's advocate, Fallout 2 also defined some player actions and made them canon, like helping out Necropolis or killing the Khans. Not to mention, there's the Vault Dwellers' memoirs. But I still didn't like this, and I thought the Vault Dwellers should have had a more ambiguous role as to not undercut player choices. Then here comes Brotherhood of Steel, which makes the Vault Dweller as ambiguous as a nuclear bomb. Heck, they even give him a voice.
I've dealt with mutants before. I still remember their master, his flesh crawling along the walls, a floor of wriggling fingers clutching at me.
I know their inclusion was clearly supposed to be a cool throwback, but ultimately, it's better that it just doesn't exist. Thankfully, that's the case, because BOS isn't a canon game. 53 Dead Claw Cave. I have no idea what this means. Dead Claw Cave? As in Death Claw Cave? If you've got any ideas what this means, let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching. And also, big shout out to Nate Leahy, who drew some new artwork of Vault Boy for my channel. These were originally intended to be Patreon and channel membership icons, but they were so good, I decided to make one of them the official channel profile picture. So definitely check Nate out. The guy's extremely talented, and his website will be linked below. Thank you again, Nate, and thank you all for watching. Much more to come. In the meantime, stay safe out there.